Thank you. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you to the Columbus Metropolitan Club for inviting me to speak today. It's really an honor to be asked to speak here at the inaugural Harrison Smith Design Awards. And it's great to be in Columbus. I must confess that when it comes to Midwest cities, I am very promiscuous. I really just love this part of the country. I love the people here. I love its cities. But there really is something special happening in Columbus. And I want to talk a little bit about that today. When I was coming here, I did kind of debate how many slides I should bring. I thought, should I bring 10 slides, 25 slides? But I decided to suppress my inner consultant and bring 0 slides. So I'm just going to talk for about 30 minutes, take some questions, and hopefully you can enjoy your brief respite from death by PowerPoint. My blog is about Midwest cities, so rather than kind of giving kind of a canned presentation to just about my general views, I wanted to try to speak directly to Columbus today. Columbus is really rocking and rolling as a city, and there's no doubt the national economy is in the tank, and Columbus hasn't been immune from that. No place has been, but this city has really been handling it better than most, and for many, many years now, this is a city that's been on an above-average uptrend. I think you guys already know that story. But what I think you'd like is for a lot more people to know the story. And I kind of understand that there's a lot of frustration locally that the Columbus story is just not as well known out there in the world as you'd like it to be, and frankly, as it deserves to be. And that's one of the things that's really been driving a lot of discussion lately around the brand of Columbus. And I realize that's much bigger than marketing, but obviously you got a good story, you want to get the word out. So I thought I would just start today by offering a word of encouragement, which is to be patient a little bit, be patient. Reputation is a lagging indicator. And I think about that in terms of, I think about all the bands that get popular, right? And you talk to their hardcore fans, and they almost always tell you that it was the first album, right, the one that sold 350 copies that was the best, right? And the new stuff, it may sell millions, but it's just not as good. And I think it's like that for a lot of things, right? The work we do that gets us the recognition is often done in obscurity, and often it's even better than the stuff we do later after we're already well known and we're kind of mailing it in a little bit. Or we can think about, all these cities, we have these bronze statues of leaders and heroes past that we honor. And I wonder sometimes, did the people in those statues, when they were doing the things that got them the statue, did they really know where they were going to end up? Right? They probably didn't. Or even just think backwards in time about this city, right? Could the people who have founded Columbus with high hopes in 1812 have in their wildest imaginations imagined what it would be today? No way, right? This city has grown and prospered beyond anything even they could have succeeded, and I'm sure they had big dreams. So recognition for Columbus is gonna come, and I think it could even be bigger than you realize, but it's probably gonna take some time, right? I mean, think about Portland, right? Portland did not get to be the darling of the urbanist intelligentsia overnight. They're known for their kind of their activewear cluster and the outdoors. The company that became Nike was founded in 1964. That was before I was born. Their famous urban growth boundary was put in place in 1979. Their light rail lines date back to the early 80s. Portland has been at this a while. They didn't get there overnight. And I think it's going to be similar for Columbus. It's going to take there, but I think the good news is, right, you're headed in the right direction. And there's really a strong foundation in place here, taking you really the place I think you want to go. When I look at Columbus, take my outsider's perspective, I see a city where the Armada is starting to get in formation. It looks like the fleet's about to engage in battle, and I'm expecting to hear many reports of victory coming up in the many coming years here. And I think one way you know you're on the right track is when you have naysayers. And I think Columbus has some. Right? I mean, there's a school of thought out there that I hear in some circles that, Columbus got lucky, basically. Like, yeah, you know what, Columbus is doing pretty good in kind of this region that struggled, but hey, they're the state capital, they've got Ohio State University, they never had the heavy manufacturing legacy to the extent that other places did. And you know what, there is some truth in that. And but there's also no shame in it. right? Nobody gets to the top without a few lucky breaks. But one of the things that I see when I look at Columbus, it's not just the good fortune, but you guys had to overcome some challenges to get where you are, right? For one thing, Columbus has traditionally been the smallest of the three C's, right? Now, I'm sure people would be quick to tell me Columbus is the biggest city in Ohio. But in terms of metro area, the region, what matters, you're still in third place behind Cleveland and Cincinnati. This region is only about 15% of the state's population. So you can't just impose your will on the state the way that a Chicagoland can, right? And there's lots of cities in Ohio that are elbowing at the State House for a piece of the pie, right? So it's tough and competitive. And then Columbus kind of came of age later than some other cities. So I think as a result, you didn't have some of the assets that they had from growing up in an earlier era. Right, I think about German Village, which is legitimately one of the finest historic districts in the United States. But this is really not that city of the dense, walkable urban neighborhoods that you find in a lot of older cities, like, say, Pittsburgh. Similarly, there's a lot of great cultural institutions in Columbus, but you don't have the Cleveland Orchestra, right? Columbus does not have any of the top 3 professional sports leagues. Right, so I think, contrary to kind of what some think, Columbus really had to overcome some headwinds to get where it is today. And I actually think that's one of the reasons it's been successful. Columbus didn't just have this priceless treasure trove of assets from some bygone glory days to fall back on and sustain you, right? So you guys had to go out and build some stuff, right? I mean, you were hungrier. And I think that helped spur your success as a city. I read a lot of civic strategies, and I always hear people talk about building on assets as the core of strategy. And I think that's important because we really do need to build on and leverage our assets, but there's another side to that story. Because assets can be a trap too. Another way to think about assets is it's the stuff we did yesterday. Right? I mean, if you think about it, the only reason we have most of these assets in the first place is that previous generations didn't go out and build on assets. They went out and created something new and created the legacy that we enjoy today. So assets can sometimes blind us to the change we need to make to get fit for tomorrow, right? Most assets don't sustain themselves. They require investment over time to maintain. So cities can end up pouring all their time and resources into more or less defending the past instead of getting ready for the future. So it's really about having a balance. You want to have a balance. Yes, we want to build on our assets, understand our assets, but we also want to ask, what is it that we can do? What can our generation do to build new and add to the pie and add to the pot for future generations to enjoy? What's our legacy? And I think that's one of the things that Columbus has really gotten right as a city. And I think it's partially because you didn't have so many assets to begin with. You had to go out and build things like the Arena District, right, that people are going to be enjoying in the future for many years to come. So I think that's one of the great things about the city. But back to getting your name out there for a minute. I do think there are some things Columbus needs to do going forward to take the story to the next level. And those of us who think we got the goods, I think sometimes fall into what I call the fallacy of awareness. And that is, this belief that is, we think we're good, and it's only if people could just see how good we were, they would recognize and reward us for that. And when it comes to cities, it goes something like this. Hey, Columbus, we have a pretty good story to tell here. We have a pretty great product. And the problem is nobody knows who we are. And so if we could just get the people out there to see more about Columbus, to know more about us, people would like it, they'd like what they see, and we'd start moving up in kind of the league tables of city estimation. And there is some truth to that because, like a lot of Midwest cities, Columbus can be a bit of a cipher in the marketplace in certain parts of the country. So obviously you want to boost the awareness. But I don't think that's enough. Because wanting to have your city taken seriously, it's a little bit like, wanting to get into the cool kids club. So how do you do that, right? Did anybody see the movie Social Network? Yeah, it was a movie about Mark Zuckerberg founding Facebook at Harvard. At the beginning of that movie, he is desperate to figure out how to get into something called a final club at Harvard. And, I grew up in rural southern Indiana and went to a Big Ten school, so I'm not really sure what a final club is, but I'm pretty sure if I went to Harvard, I wouldn't have got into one. So how do you get in, right? How do you get into the club? And I think it goes without saying you have to have all the qualifications, right? You have to be rich. You have to be good looking. You have to suck up to the right people. But is that enough? Is that enough to get? Sometimes it is, but more often than not, it isn't. And that's because if you think about it, kind of the defining characteristic of a clique is exclusivity. So it comes as no surprise at all to me that the taste arbiters of what cities are, the coolest, the most progressive, the best, the academics, the journalists, the urbanists, the activists, they all tend to pick the same kind of handful of cities, right? The other thing cliques do is they kind of enforce a kind of conformity of mindset. And it just so happens that most of those cities are the one most of them live in. Funny how that works, So if you're Columbus, right, how do you get people like that, right, to go off the reservation and talk about you, right? How do you get a hotshot Harvard professor to start pounding the table saying, you guys got to take a good look at Columbus, right? That's the question to answer. And, thinking about that, when I look at this city, I see a place that just gets it in so many ways, just gets it. I mean, from everything from, bike infrastructure and the importance of the arts to the meat and potatoes around business climate and quality of life. But you know what? That's not enough. It's not enough to just check all the boxes, right? You have to go above and beyond to really get taken seriously, right? I mean, it's like if you want to be a member of the club, right, the other places are not going to open the door and invite in Columbus. Columbus is going to have to break the door down. I mean, this city is going to have to force itself into the conversation, right? To get people to pay attention, it's going to take relentless hard work in creating a product that is so compelling, that the urbanist elite, that the media, that civic leaders across America have no choice but to take it seriously. And I think the story of, we have, a prosperous economy, great quality of life, low cost, great place to go to school, great place to raise a family, kind of wrapped up with a few Columbus-specific amenities like German Village. I don't think that's really sufficient to go out there in the marketplace with because, frankly, there are a lot of cities in America who could tell a pretty good story about themselves. And there's some other ones here in the Midwest that could make a good story. So I think it's good, but we need to work harder to differentiate ourselves in the marketplace. And I think that means you got to set a higher bar on some things you want to achieve. And I'll give you one example. I'm going to quote one of your local leaders who was in the New York Times article about branding. And if he's here, I'm sure he'll collar me and give me a piece of his mind afterwards. But this person, I don't know who it was. This person said, candidly, we believe we're one of the brightest stars in Ohio's future. And I said to myself, one of the brightest stars in Ohio. And I thought to myself, this is just like, I lived in Indianapolis. This is just like the people in Indianapolis who get very excited when another newspaper calls them the diamond of the Rust Belt. And I'm like, there's nothing wrong with being in Ohio. I mean, it would be ludicrous to try to pretend you're not in Ohio. Columbus can be very proud of being in Ohio and its role in the state and the state's future, right? But if you want America and the world to pay attention to you, you need an ambition level for this city that matches that aspiration. That means you got to think a lot bigger than Ohio, a lot bigger than the Midwest. You got to be thinking big, right? And I think that's the lesson of Portland. That's the real lesson. It's not bike lanes or light rail. Portland didn't get to be Portland by saying, well, we have all the great West Coast amenities. We got the mountains and such, but you know what? It's a great, best quality of life, lowest cost, best business climate city, so come on down from California. I mean, all that's true. But what Portland really did is Portland went out and did nothing less than define a new vision of what a small city could be in America, right? And then they went out and delivered on it, right? Through decades of hard work and execution, right? So I think if Columbus wants to raise its profile, then similarly, this community needs to start, setting the agenda for cities in some areas, right? that doesn't mean copy Portland, but copy the idea of we're going to find a path that's unique and new and different in at least a few areas, and we're going to put a stake in the ground, and we're going to show some people how it's done. And we're going to make a name for ourselves in the marketplace. Right? So I think if Columbus wants to be one of the places people talk about in America, one of the places to be, right, then rather than really checking the boxes, I think sometimes we got to say, we're going to get rid of some of those boxes, and we're going to add some new boxes to the checklist, right? And those are the boxes that the other cities are going to feel compelled to check off tomorrow because of what we did right here in Columbus. And of course, you don't have to do that in every area. There's plenty of scope to learn from others. But you got to pick at least a few places where you're going to say, you know what? We're going to do things different in Columbus, right? We're going to go our own path. We think we have a better idea. We're going to do something new, innovative, and different and show the world how it's done. And that's how to build a reputation. And that's not easy. That's not easy. Doing something different isn't easy. It takes leadership. It takes courage. It takes sustained commitment over time, and it takes a willingness to embrace risk. Right? It means you're going to have to pile a lot of chips on one square and let it ride for a while. But that's what it takes to get to the big leagues. And what it doesn't take is a belief that everything has to come, though, from kind of the public sector, or that it has to come from some civic leadership, quasi-public sector civic leadership. Obviously, I think there needs to be some public sector initiatives that are really ambitious and set the new agenda. But if you look at a lot of the cool cities, what you really see is most of the cool stuff being done in those cities is simply done by cool people who've chosen to live there, who've chosen to start a business there, build a life there, raise a family there. So what Columbus also needs to be able to do is to be able to attract those people here and say, we need to get those talented, ambitious, big dreamers, those innovative thinkers who are going to do things in this city, right, that help build the reputation as a place where big things are happening. And this is related to the notion of human capital generally, which is something that I never tire of talking about because it's so important. Harvard economist Ed Glazer did a ton of research. He tried to understand what is it about these northern cold weather cities that makes them successful or not. And what he found was it could overwhelmingly be explained by one and only one variable. And that was the percentage of people with college degrees in 1960. And actually, there's nothing magical about 1960. You go back to 1940 and get pretty much the same result. The key is that college degree attainment is overwhelmingly determinant in urban success. There's an organization called CEOs for Cities. It's a national network of urban leaders. If you don't know who they are, you should find out because they're a really great organization. They had an economist, Joe Courtwright, crunch the numbers to determine what would it mean for cities if they could increase their college degree attainment by just 1 percentage point. And they called that resulting economic benefit the talent dividend. It's a term you might have heard before. The talent dividend for Columbus Metro is $1.3 billion a year. That's right. Columbus would recognize a net economic benefit of $1.3 billion every single year just by raising college degree attainment by 1 percentage point. So that's the size of the prize. And the good news is Columbus already has a very good college degree attainment. I believe the latest numbers, you were 33.3%, so a third of adults with college degrees. And that was 17 out of 52 cities with more than 1 million in their metro area. But there's still work to do. To put it in perspective, number one is Washington, D.C. They have 47.3%. So there's still a gap up to close in terms of getting into the talent elite, but you're on the right track. So I would say it's imperative for Columbus is generally to increase its educational attainment across the board. And that entails a mix of both educating your current residents, and not just university, but also K-12, vocational technical training, corporate training. And education being a complex, controversial topic worthy of a speech in its own right. I'm not going to say a lot about that today, but it's critically important. But also attracting new people here. That's the other side of the equation. Notice that I say attraction, not retention. And almost all talent initiatives focus on retaining talent or stopping brain drain or something like that. And there's nothing wrong with retaining talent. I like to retain talent too. But the way I look at it is Columbus has got 1.7 million people you could retain, and you've got about 6 billion people out there in the world you can attract, right? So which pond would you rather be fishing out of, right? And I think the other thing is, in terms of our new, more ambitious agenda, this community needs to be confident that you didn't have to grow up here and you didn't have to go to school here to want to live here. And that this might be a place that, believe it or not, people who have no previous connection to the city might actually feel like it's got something to offer them. So I think that's that type of more bolder thinking that we need to be having as a city. And the other one is if you start looking at how particularly you attract those really, those really ambitious, innovative, entrepreneurial people who are going to do that cool stuff, right? Think about how other places got them, right? Silicon Valley, didn't get to be the tech talent hub of the world by retaining the graduates of Palo Alto High School, or even of just Stanford, right? They hoovered up everybody else's talent. So it's just, I think we need to retain, and things that make us attractive to others also help retain. But I don't think we need to say that we need to home grow all our own talent, but people from around the world might want to live here. So the question is, how do you attract those people? And particularly, how do you attract those really ambitious, innovative, entrepreneurial people who are going to put you on the map? Well, attracting people is like attracting business. If you want to attract business, you need a good business climate, and you need aggressive recruitment. If you want to attract people, you need a good people climate, and you need aggressive recruitment, right? So what makes a good people climate? Well, similar, it's much the same things that make a good business climate, right? All things being equal, low cost and easy living beats high cost and hassles any day. And Columbus is really positioned to shine here. It's one of the cheapest major housing markets in America, just a great quality of life. So there's a lot of good things on tap here. The challenge for a place like Columbus is when it comes to choosing a city to live in, it's not like buying a laundry detergent. It's a lot more like buying a house, right? It's an emotional purchase. I'm guessing most of you do not live in the cheapest house you could possibly find, right? More likely the opposite, that you live in the most expensive house you could afford, right? In the best neighborhood, with the nicest amenities, with the best schools, right? Price was a factor, but it wasn't the only factor, right? When it comes to choosing houses in cities, it's not just about the price, it's about the product. So I think for Columbus, you really have to focus on building a product that people, again, college degree people, those ambitious dreamers, innovators, that they're willing to buy on its own merits, not just because it's cheap. And, so the question is, well, how do you do that? Well, I'll give you one example, right? Sticking with our house analogy, right? Cities like houses, they have to have curb appeal, right? They have to look good. They have to be designed well. And that's particularly true in Columbus because, I've seen the weather here the last couple days, all right? Right? It's flatter than a pancake here in the Midwest. We don't have any mountains. We don't have any beaches. The built environment, the things that we create, count for so much more here in the Midwest than it does in other places. So we really have to bring that focus on design and design excellence every day. And I'm encouraged in one thing. I think the fact that we're all here today, right, is not only a testament that Bill Smith got it on that, but a testament that all of you get it on that. And we just need to make sure that the community continues to get it and continues to focus on improving the quality of design every day and make every project an award winner. And that doesn't mean you forget about cost, by the way, right? Columbus is not New York City. It's never going to be. People are not going to pay any price, bear any burden for the privilege of living, working, and doing business here. Right? They're just not going to do it. But really, so often, it's more about commitment than cost. I've seen lots of expensive monstrosities in my day, and I've also seen a lot of very cheap but delightful design. So it's really about value more than spending a lot of extra money sometimes. So I think Columbus really needs to bring a focus and a commitment to excellence in design and maximizing the value per dollar to everything that you do. Because it's the money is tight these days, but it's an ever more competitive global world out there. And so getting the most value out of it, including the value on the design front, is critical. Now, once you've got that product, how do you sell it? And like a lot of things, you got to have a story. You got to have a story to tell. You need a narrative. You need an aspirational narrative about Columbus, about life in this city, that people who don't live here yet can imagine themselves being a part of. If you think about TV shows like Seinfeld, Friends, or Sex and the City, they've created an image of what it's like to live in New York that even people who've never visited can relate to. Or think about Portland. What comes to mind when you think of Portland, right? You think of people hiking in the mountains. You think of hipsters riding their bicycles. You think of people sipping microbrews. But what comes to mind when you think of Columbus? What's the unique story about life in this city that's different and better than other places? And I think that is really the key question your branding initiative needs to answer. You need to answer, what is that brand promise of our city, that story we can tell? And then, of course, you have to deliver on it. And that's really where my previous point about having that high ambition level really comes into play, particularly when you're trying to market yourself to talent, right? I mean, smart, talented, ambitious people who have big dreams and plans for themselves, they want to live in a city where the civic aspiration matches their personal aspiration, right? Not in a place where good enough is good enough. The labor force of the 21st century is in demand, right? That top scientist who wants to cure cancer, top researchers, internet entrepreneurs, social innovators, these people have choices about where to live. So when Columbus says, we're going for the brass ring, you're sending a powerful message to those people that this is a place where important personal and professional ambitions can be realized. And I think that really helps anchor your narrative around what you can accomplish here. Right, so you got the ambition, you've got the product, you've got the narrative. I also think you need the culture. You need to create a culture in which this is a place that people believe they can achieve recognition and achieve their ambitions faster and easier than everywhere else. Paradoxically, it can sometimes be easier for young talent to make it in New York City than in a smaller city like Columbus. And that's because although New York is brutally competitive, and most people don't make it, places like New York and LA are always on the lookout for the fresh face, right? There's always lots of young talent kind of perking in the system. Whereas I think in the Midwest, we've got this kind of, it's like you need to rise up through the ranks, right? You need to climb the ladder. You need to pay your dues. And there's nothing inherently wrong for that, with that. But think about it. I'm somebody who thinks I really got the goods, right? I got the fire in my belly. Right? I'm burning with ambition to accomplish things. Am I really going to be willing to get on that long career path in a place like Columbus if I don't have any connection there? And, I grew up in rural southern Indiana near Louisville, Kentucky. I also lived in central Indiana. So I have tremendous personal affection for Louisville and Indianapolis, and I'm willing to put up with a lot from those cities. But am I willing to do the same thing for Columbus? I don't know that I am. So I think Columbus ought to be famous as a place where young talent can be taken seriously, right? And where you can make it to the top fast and get recognition if you perform, of course, right? Where the power structures are permeable, right? And we're just plain easier to make things happen than anywhere else, right? So if you get that culture, along with the product and the ambition level, and you're able to recruit people here, then I think you're going to be unstoppable as a city, unstoppable. And my last point is about recruitment. And I think it's very clear, no city puts even half the effort into recruiting people that they do into recruiting business. And as I tell anybody, this is a huge, wide open opportunity for a city like Columbus to step up, get really, really aggressive about bringing talent here to town. I got to be honest. I am mind-boggled that despite the enormous, gigantic sums of money every place spends on talent and brain drain initiatives. I mean, Ohio has to have spent hundreds of millions of dollars on that, right? Nobody ever really seems to try recruiting anyone. And it's almost like there's a belief that talent is some ethereal substance that just kind of wafts in on the winds if you put up a website targeting young professionals, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, but I mean, talent is human beings. It's people, it's real people. And just like with a company and employees, right, just like with a university and students, cities have to go out there and recruit talent. But they don't do it. They don't do it. There's an old axiom in sales that says you have to ask for the business, right? I don't see a lot of cities out there that are asking. And they don't really seem to be in the serious business of selling themselves. And too often, talent seems to be like a Christmas tree ornament. It's sort of this all-purpose justification that you use to decorate arguments for stuff you already wanted to do anyway, right? Build a new stadium, oh yeah, that's about talent. Light rail line, that's about talent. Bike lanes, talent. Art galleries, talent. Lots of civic organizations and programs, that's all about talent. But do you believe it? Well, if you believe it, then you got to go out there and act like it and recruit. And I'll tell you one thing, I'll just be very direct on this point. Columbus already failed the Urbanophile test. And you shouldn't feel too bad about that because no city's ever passed it. In fact, I was so confident, I was so confident that you would fail that I didn't even prepare what I would say if you passed. And that is to say, I've been here 2 days. You know, I've met a lot of people, and I was at a wonderful reception at the Urban Land Institute yesterday, and I got to mingle with some people up front. Not one person tried to sell me on Columbus. That's not to say you have to offer me a job, right? They have to give me the hard sell, but not one person talked about what Columbus has to offer in terms of what it could offer me, what this community might have, things I might be able to get here that I couldn't get in Chicago or couldn't get anywhere else. Put it in context of how it might appeal to me personally. You know, I go around to a lot of cities and nobody ever does that. What they really want is for me to write nice blog posts and articles about them. And you can believe they pitched that idea, right? They pitched that very, very aggressively. And when I contrast how strongly they pitched that with the non-existent pitch for me coming here, it's really stark. You know, and I'm not going to profess to be a Nobel Prize winner, but you thought enough of me to bring me in here today, so while you got me here, why not try to pitch me on your town? I think you ought to use every touch point with someone who's not in this community as an opportunity to sell them on it, right? It's not just the job of the folks at the Chamber of Commerce. It's everybody's job, right? It's your job. You should consider yourself a fully licensed privateer of talent, you know, armed with your letter of marque, out there on the high seas of talent, you know, fully deputized to recruit new sailors into the Columbus fleet. They're going to take you and build that reputation tomorrow. So think about recruitment because nobody does it, and it's a huge opportunity for you. And I want to wrap up. With a few thoughts about Columbus and where it is today. You know, it's easy to come up with a list of, you know, here's all the things we got to do, right? Or here's all the problems we have. And, you know, I just added to your to-do list today. But I think it's important to keep in mind where the city is in its life cycle, right? I mean, most Midwest cities, you know, their glory days were in the past, right? Think about Cincinnati. They used to call it Porkopolis. It was the queen city of the Midwest, right? When Chicago was a kind of a frontier trading post. Well, that was 150 years ago, right? Cleveland used to be the 6th largest city in America. It's now 41st. Chicago is not even the 2nd city anymore, right? And it's not that I dislike these places. I love Chicago. I live there, right? You know, I've been going to Cincinnati since I was a kid. It's just a wonderful town. And I think these places can be successful, but no matter what they do, they're never going to be as big as important in America on a relative basis as they were in the past, right? Their peak is forever going to be behind them, right? But Columbus is very, very different, right? Columbus has never been a larger, more important, and more influential city in America and the world than it is right now, right? This city is not trying to turn around the decline. It's still on the way up. Right? Columbus's best days are still ahead of it. And I think that makes a huge difference. And I think, again, about the leaders in these cities like Cleveland and Chicago back in the day. Think about the Burnham Plan era of Chicago. They had horrible challenges. They had big dreams, but they were just massive, overwhelming problems to deal with. But they really persevered. But look what they created, and look what they created in their cities. And, you know, you're those leaders for Columbus. Right? This is the real opportunity for Columbus, which is to really step up and take this city to realize the potential of what it could be. Right? A potential that I think, again, could be a lot bigger than even you realize. And, you know, and unlike a lot of places, I think you've really got the opportunity to get there if you want it and you're willing to go out and do what it takes, right, to make it happen. And, you know, don't get me wrong, you don't have to go for the top. Right? Most people don't want to play Carnegie Hall. Most people just want to have a prosperous life, right? Leave their kids better off than they were. And, you know, Columbus could say, hey, we're just going to be demographically healthy, you know, good economy, great quality of life, great place to go to school, a great place to be. That would be a prosperous future for Columbus. Probably wouldn't get a great reputation that way. Not going to build a big rep in the market, but it's a perfectly valid choice and be a successful future. But I get the impression that Columbus wants more, that it's hungrier for more. And as I said, unlike most places, I think you get the opportunity to get there. And, I look around the room. I look around this room and I say, you know what? This is the generation, and you're the leaders, right, whose names can be written in tomorrow's history books about this city, right? When people look back years from now at Columbus, people can say this is the time when the community really stepped up and took this city from just like the potential of what it could be to really realizing it and taking it to the next level, right? And there's no guarantees. That's going to be a hard challenge to get there. Again, it's going to take that leadership, that courage, commitment, willingness to embrace risk. And it's going to take some good luck. There's no guarantees you can get there. But I will say this, Columbus has a legitimate opportunity to make it happen. And that's something that does not come along for every city in every generation. So I sure hope Columbus makes the most of the opportunity you have in front of you today. Thank you.
Aaron, I would like to invite you to move to Columbus. And I think, how many people would like to join me in the invitation to invite Aaron to move to Columbus? And I think I can offer you about 170 new friends that would be more than happy to help you establish Urbanophile here in Columbus. Great. And anyone who knows me already knows that I'm the #1 cheerleader of this city anyway. So please, we'll be happy to talk to you about it. And I think you'll find it the friendliest city in the United States and perhaps one of the friendliest cities in the world. So
great. Now you're cooking with gas.
There you go. And now, folks, it's your turn. As you know, Columbus Metropolitan Club always leaves time for questions, and we have a microphone up here, so if you want to make your way up to the microphone. CMC films all of its programs for rebroadcast on WOSU 34.2, the cable channel, local on demand, Time Warner Cable, local on demand, the Ohio channel, and also our forums are available on our website and the library website. So we have a question. Would you please introduce yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, Cleve Ricksecker. Welcome to the #1 gay-friendly metro in the U.S.
Right. I saw that article.
Yeah. My question, I preceded by about 15 seconds of comment. The average, the density in the city of Columbus has dropped from about 9,000 people per square mile to 3,000 per square mile since 1950. The metro now sprawls out into 8-9 counties. Can a city really achieve its aspirations if it allows itself to diffuse?
Right. I am not as totally anti-sprawl as some. I think the reality is most people prefer a suburban lifestyle. We just have to start with that acknowledgement. On the other hand, there are people who prefer urban living. And, there's really, I think it's actually better to be in the urban living business because we're not really building much new urban product today. So people who prefer urban lifestyles have to come to the city, whereas if you want a suburban lifestyle, you can always go to the next shiny new thing. So every suburban town's got a competitive issue. There's unlimited new product. And so I think what I've sort of said is we need to go for a 10% solution. We're not going to roll the clock back to 1950 overnight. Let's go for a 10% solution where the goal should be we're going to capture 10% of net new regional growth for the center city over time. And for Columbus, you get a run rate of about 200,000 people a decade in growth. So that's 20,000 people every decade coming downtown. If you could do that as to start with, and of course, if you can get more, great. If you can ramp it up, great. But we don't have to have some wholesale move back to the city. Just capturing some limited market share of just the net new, without even a single person moving downtown, can be transformational. I'll give you a great example. Atlanta, Georgia. For those of you, obviously they're known for their massive sprawl. And similar kind of built form to Columbus, kind of an older, not super urban state capital, obviously burned down at one point. But the thing is, their city population is now at an all-time high. And they've gone up by like over 100,000 people. They've had like 20-something% growth since the 2000 census. And they really only captured about 10% of that new growth. Now, of course, they had like 1.5 million new residents to draw from. But that's still impressive, and Atlanta is re-urbanizing in a hurry. And so I think that the reality is there's plenty of opportunity to have a thriving core without having to shut down the suburbs. As I say, I don't want to tear the suburbs down. I want to bring the city up. And that to have a prosperous region, every part of it needs to know its role in the team and bring its A game. So that's what I'd say.
George O'Donnell. 40 years ago, rail was discussed in Central Ohio, and Bill Smith was for it, by the way. There was one person, a Titan, who said no. On the knock down the door checklist that you referred to earlier, Aaron, shouldn't we be looking at rail from a 35-mile reach from the 4 basic compass points to, in fact, then create more synergy in the CBD to the Arena District, so that people can become more familiar coming downtown quickly? Where should light rail be in the Titans' minds and in the visionaries' minds in this room?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's critical that Columbus have a better transit system, because if you think about it, if your central city is automobile dependent and you have to use your car, then you're really competing with the suburbs for a car-based lifestyle. And if you're in competition with a place that's new and designed from the ground up for car-based living, you're probably going to fail in that competition. So you need to have environments that are distinct enough that you really don't need a car. I would say it's probably going to be tough to change the situation here overnight. Again, I think about Indianapolis, which has a very poor transit system and kind of a similar built form. I think the core has to start with a great bus system in the urban core, not just not even necessarily bus rapid transit, just plain old bus service on like headways that you can actually show up without a schedule and get around. And then you look at the corridors where you can build rail on that. I'm not a bigot on mode. I think we could look at rail where it makes sense, bus rapid transit where it makes sense, light rail, commuter rail. I think bus service, though, a good quality urban bus network has really got to be the core of where you start. When it comes to building rail out into the suburbs, there's kind of 2 schools of thought on that. And, I have a little bit soured on it because it almost seems like when we build a rail line far, and I'm thinking about this in terms of Chicago, which is just extended metro lines almost 50 miles from downtown. I'm like, why should we make it easy for people to live 50 miles out? I mean, it's sort of like, if people want to live 35 miles from downtown, let them sit in traffic. I mean, that's not, On the other hand, though, I do see where what you really want to do, and I think like a lot of the commuter lines in Chicago have really kind of bound the suburbs and the city together. And that the suburbs that aren't really along these metro rail corridors become much more disconnected from downtown. They become very focused around suburban office parks and suburban amenities. And so over time, they drift apart and there's less common cause. So I think there's really kind of 2 competing interests there in suburban rail. On the one hand, build it, and it brings your suburbs and city together, but it also kind of actually makes it easier to live further out. When what we really want to do is make it easier and better and more convenient for people to live in town, which is why I say focus with the urban bus system first.
We're running out of time, so let's do one more question quickly, please.
I'll be happy to hang out for a while outside, too.
He's going to stay with us for a while, and we're going to have coffee and cookies out in the
Oh, great.
lobby.
I need some cookies.
Yay.
How do you feel about the importance of long-distance rail travel, like passenger rail? We've recently had an opportunity to have connecting rail between Cleveland, Cincinnati, Columbus, and Dayton. And whether that goes forward or not will remain to be seen. But what are your thoughts on that?
High-speed rail, I think, I understand, I don't think the critics are necessarily evil. I understand that it's a speculative enterprise. We don't know exactly what the benefits could be. They've been good in other countries, but the United States is very different than other countries. I have generally been someone who says high-speed rail can be very good, but it's really got to deliver a capability that we can't get today. And the current proposals are all what I call Amtrak on steroids. Even 110 mile per hour service does not make that step change reduction in end-to-end journey time that really creates a new capability that you can't get through air travel. So the Chicago to St. Louis line, you can drive it in 5 hours, right? And so that means it's 5 hours on a megabus, which is sort of a very, very cheap motor coach that runs between Chicago and various cities, and they've got Wi-Fi, and a ticket's like probably, it starts at $1, but 25 could be like your average ticket. And the proposed $2 billion rail line there is only going to get it down to like 4.5 hours. And that's barely competitive with air travel. And so I think you really got to look at a true high-speed rail solution if it's going to make it work. The other thing I'd say is, the state politics have kind of created this 3C line, whereas I think, if I were Columbus, I would be less interested in getting connected to Cleveland and Cincinnati than I would be getting connected to Chicago or other major hubs. So I think, we think of it, 3C line is sort of like an Indianapolis, St. Louis, Columbus route. Nobody would even conceive of that route, but if they were all in the same state, you could believe it could be conceived of. So I think it's an artifact, 3C is an artifact of state geography, not travel demand. So there's the old line between, the old Pennsylvania line between Indy and Columbus has been abandoned. That's probably why there's no Columbus to Chicago connection. But I think that's a good thing because trying to upgrade existing rail lines is just the Amtrak on steroids. So I think with high-speed rail, you got to go big or go home. And I do think there are legitimate questions that are going to have to be asked in America about what we can afford right now, given our financial situation.
Well, please join me in thanking Aaron one more time.
Thank you.
And as I just mentioned, please join us in the lobby. With any luck, we'll have some coffee and cookies out there. And congratulate our winners from the first Harrison Smith Awards with the Downtown Commission. I want to thank our sponsors, Casto, Columbus Underground, and Smith & Hale. And those of you, happy Hanukkah, and enjoy the afternoon.